because, as I'm sure you know, one of the difficulties with management development is people go off on a course, they have an amazing time, they discover new things about themselves and the world, but it's very difficult for them to communicate that back at home. And therefore, very often, we give them projects to do, which are supposed to have impact at work. But of course, these are busy people who already have enough projects, and what's to distinguish this project from any other one, apart from the fact that somehow it's branded with our leadership program. But it's actually just making more work for them, and not really in any necessary way involving other people in the organisation. Whereas coaching ourselves is a ready-made tool for participants on programs to bring that learning and structure that learning to their colleagues in the wider group. Furthermore, it models a way of managing which is inherently humane and listening oriented, participative, and intellectually demanding and rigorous, but in a way that is connected with the realities of the world people are dealing with. So I think I've found it, I'm doing a lot of work now on responsible leadership and the topic of this ILA conference, inclusive leadership, which is why we wanted to bring this workshop here now. It's because it is a method which is intrinsically inclusive. It includes all people who, in the work of learning and analysing and trying to understand and bring insight into the organisation. And now I want to move on to the final part of my talk, which is about my own experience of using this. I've worked for 14 years at the University of Exeter. I was involved in the last few years in the major transitions taking place in that institution, as in many. And at Exeter, these were really focused around attempts to shift a significant amount of resource from the traditional strengths in humanities and social sciences towards the natural sciences and new emerging multidisciplinary areas around life sciences and so on. And this required the reduction obviously in employment and so on. So it had meant negotiating new contracts, some early retirements and severance, shifting of resources from one part to another. And these kinds of changes, as we all know, are very disturbing for people, and universities are designed, built and run for continuity, and change is particularly difficult in universities. And I, like many of my colleagues, felt quite upset about a lot of this, quite disoriented. I felt that I didn't know what was going on, I was being kept in the dark and so on. So did many other people. And in the run-up to this, just before it happened, I invited a former student of mine, now a senior manager in Fujitsu in Japan, who's been a long-time advocate of coaching ourselves and using it in his companies in Fujitsu. He came and gave a talk about these. He's on the board at the business school at Exeter and was here for a board meeting. He gave a talk, and in the audience was one of our HR business partners who picked up these ideas and introduced coaching ourselves. And the first I knew about it was an invitation to facilitate a training, which I went to and then participated in a number of coaching ourselves sessions. And one in particular stands out in my mind. It's the one where we compare two different perspectives on organizational change. And in the room doing this session, I was with some academic colleagues from other parts of the university, but also administrators and student services people, admissions officers and so on. And it was a really wonderful experience to both be able to voice my own perspective on these changes, how it was affecting me and my middle management role, and to hear from other people. And in some ways it was very affirming that I wasn't the only person who was feeling disoriented and a bit in the dark and not knowing where it was going and unsure about whether this was going to be good and helpful or not for the work I've been trying to pursue, the department I've been trying to build up for so many years, and all these things. That other people were feeling the same things, it's not just me. But also I was able to hear from people for whom it was a much more hopeful experience, that they could really see the opportunity that these changes offered, and give voice to that. And that helped me get a much more constructive perspective on the changes that were taking place, and think more clearly and enact more clearly my own role as departmental manager and a contributor in lots of different parts of the university's management. And so I came to find that coaching ourselves really was very useful in practice. It was it was a really nice experience, and helped me personally and had a big impact on many other people across the university. So I think I'm able to promote and wholeheartedly promote coaching ourselves on the three grounds that it has I think a sound intellectual and pedagogic base, which we developed from the IMPM, as I mentioned, with mindsets and so on. It's practically useful as a leadership developer and enabling leadership and management development to be both participative and constructive and focused in the workshop or classroom, and an effective tool to take that learning back into the workplace. And thirdly, as a participant, I found it a very enriching, rewarding and empowering experience. So I hope you too will have the opportunity to try coaching ourselves and that you find it useful. I'm very sorry not to be there with you at the ILA this time, but I'll be very happy to respond to any contacts you want to make,